Welcome back, everyone. You have once again tuned in to the Smooth Thrills Radio Hour, your historical and cultural guide to films both known and unknown, both mainstream and obscure. Now, the movie we're talking about in this episode falls more toward the obscure end of that spectrum. It never really achieved a lot of mainstream success, but the people who have found this movie know it very, very well, especially if they're fans of the director Ken Russell. It is Altered States, and we're very excited to bring you this discussion. Nathan and Katie are here to help sort out this strange movie based on a book that was itself kind of based on true facts. It's kind of hard to say. There's a lot of weird ideas going on here, but we're going to try to suss it all out for you. So, let's get on with it. But first, Dr. Jessup, so glad you could make it. How was your weekend?
I followed a pack of wild dogs to the zoo. That's how I got there. In the zoo, I hunted down, killed, and ate a small sheep.
Well, why would you, did you think he might like it?
Whether he would or wouldn't, I didn't think he'd be a dick about it. That's the key thing there. I know not everybody's going to like the things I like, but it doesn't mean you have to make me feel minuscule for liking it.
Like to the typical fan, I mean, not even a fan, but like a typical film goer, that's going to be a leap, you know? Like, that's why I was wondering if he had, like, he'd like watched other Argento films and liked it, or...
Oh, God, no. No.
Okay,
It was just a friend of mine that I thought wouldn't be a dick about it.
Yeah.
And I'm not kidding. Literally, the whole 40-minute drive home.
But that's a good barometer, though.
How shitty it was. And, well, I never saw anything else with him after that, because then we quit being friends around when Hereditary came out. And I remember telling him that I was glad that we didn't see that together, because he really would have made me feel like shit for liking it.
I don't understand that.
Because he's just that person.
But yeah, but like, you wouldn't do that to something he loves that you don't like.
Exactly. I think there was a time in my life I would have, but I'm not that person anymore.
Right.
Like what you want to like, I'll like what I want to like.
You like your shit, I'll like my shit. Let's be cool about it, you know?
You're a huge fan of Desperately Seeking Susan. I'm not so much a fan of Desperately Seeking Susan. It's okay.
It's a fun movie, Jason. I keep telling you.
No, I know somebody who has seen that movie like hundreds of times.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's a 30-plus year obsession for people, that movie. Anyway, you can cut all this preamble.
I clearly needed to get that out of my system.
No, this is the best part. Trust me.
Like it's 16 minutes.
Well, that's how long it's going to take me to get through this intro.
Oh, did you cut it down at all?
I cut it down to a page and a half.
Really?
Just bear with me on this one. If at any point you want to stop and ask a question during this intro, I'll understand. So anyway, in the 1930s, German psychologist Wolfgang Metzger introduced to the field of experimental psychology a theory he called the Ganzfeld effect. The idea is, if you present people with a totally homogeneous visual and auditory field, perceptual distortions would start happening. Distortions that could, after long enough, become hallucinations. Now, this wasn't really a new idea. Like, the ancient Greeks would hang around in pitch-black caves to receive wisdom in a process they called the prisoner's cinema. Coal miners trapped in mining accidents have reported seeing ghosts and hearing weird noises after being stuck in total darkness for hours and so on. Now, Metzger's experiments put volunteers into really rudimentary sort of isolation. They cut tennis balls in half to go over your eyes, put headphones over your ears. Something similar to what might happen should you follow a certain Uncle Ernie to Tommy's holiday camp, but we'll get to that in a minute. It didn't really amount to much, It was a deeply flawed experiment, but the idea of it never really went away. And it got picked up by two very important people who ended up taking it in two very different directions. The first of these people was a guy named Donald Ewan Cameron. Now, Cameron believed, among other things, that mental illness is contagious, that the German people are, by birth, psychopaths that must be monitored at all times, and more importantly, that you can cure all mental problems by isolating people, not only from any sense of time and space, but from themselves, through a rigorous program of massive electroshock therapy and staggering cocktails of drugs. He thought you could effectively erase their brains of all of that stuff, good and bad, take them down to a completely devolved state, and build back an ideal person from there. Cameron's experiments were carried out at the McGill Allen Memorial Institute. Tragically, mostly on unsuspecting people who thought they were only coming in for some advice on how to handle their depression, and instead found themselves imprisoned in solitary confinement, getting shots and electroshocks all day and night, and losing their very identities. Those experiments were later revealed to the public as the CIA program known as MK Ultra. Now, fortunately for us, we're not going down that particular path this time. No, we're going to follow more in the footsteps of that second person I mentioned, someone who's also a fan of sensory deprivation, known as John C. Lilly. Now, John Lilly is an absolutely fascinating guy. He was involved in psychoanalysis, biophysics, neurophysiology, computer science, and LSD research. He believed that he had developed a way of directly communicating with dolphins. His books on the subject were kind of sort of adapted into a George C. Scott movie called Day of the Dolphin. Seen it? In the 1970s, he branched out into several other drugs, including ketamine, that he claimed opened his mind to the existence of a cosmic hierarchy of intelligences, of which we inhabit the section called the Earth Coincidence Control Office. You kind of get the idea of what I'm getting at here. Most importantly for us, though, John Lilly is the guy who invented the sensory isolation tank, perfecting Metzger's original ideas, isolating the human mind from all distractions. No electroshocks, just a little bit of drugs mixed in just to make sure. So we have two men, two ideas on sensory isolation. Cameron, who wanted to use it to devolve the human being, and Lilly, who wanted to use it to expand the limits of the human mind. Both of these men come together in the form of Dr. Jessup, the hero and the villain of the movie we're discussing today, Altered States. Welcome everyone to the Smooth Thrills Radio Hour. We are indeed talking about Ken Russell's Altered States. Now, Katie, this was actually your suggestion this time around. What drew you to this particular film?
When I used to work at the movie store FYE, I would always see the cover of it in the discount bin. So I've just always wanted to see it because of that.
That was deep.
I mean, you asked.
Deep in the
That
bin.
is the only thing.
So basically, you were looking for an excuse to watch Altered States.
And
It
I'm
was
going
right
to be
behind
honest,
Malibu's
now
Most
that
Wanted.
I've seen
I
it,
didn't-
not at all what I was expecting, and I'm kind of glad I never watched it back then, because I do believe me 15 years ago would have hated this.
What were you expecting out of this?
Not a fucking monkey.
Well, thank you
Been
everybody for
good?
listening.
No, I just thought it was about drugs, and I didn't even know it had to deal with the deprivation.
Sure.
Honestly, just from the cover alone, I mean, you don't really know much from that.
Which cover are you talking about? The
Right.
one that's got
The
William
one-
Hurt with the the
It's like
electro.
a black cover.
Because the Blu-ray cover is awful.
Oh,
It's
now I
not that
want to
one.
look at
Really?
the different covers. It's the one that's got the black
I didn't even know it had a
background
Blu-ray
where
release.
he's like upside down.
Yeah, that's the traditional
Yeah, that
poster
one.
art. Yeah. I love that because it's ominous. You don't know what is in store. Like it's
Exactly.
Yeah,
And what the Blu-ray cover is bad.
yeah, it's just I don't know.
It looks like the cover of Sphere.
Yeah, it looks like when they did the reissue of Brainstorm or something. It's
Brain.
awful.
Yeah. Remember that?
I don't know, but it's one of those that still creeps me out. I remember the TV spots when I was a
Mm.
kid. It was one of the early horror films that I was afraid of, but I never seen it just because I saw the clips on TV.
The cover.
There's no
yeah.
way I was going to see it. I was about 3 when this movie released. There's no way I was going to see it, but I was scared, but I was intrigued. So I knew it was something I would see at a later point. And just the deprivation tank and him upside down and all that, I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was freaky, and I didn't like it, but I did like it.
So you remember it being presented as a horror movie, though?
Well,
Oh, always.
I took it as that.
For
I mean,
me.
you don't have to say that it really was publicized in that fashion, but to me, the score and everything about it was scary as shit. And I still think, I watched the trailer again, I still think it's very, it was around the same time as the next year we had, the werewolf craze. And it was very much in league with that era. Like it's the whole
transformation.
There's that, but it's also the whole pursuing something we don't know, the unknown, which always scares me.
Yeah.
Like if you tap into this point in your brain, what percentage do we use of our brain during our lifespan? Like you tap into that unconscious, who knows what's there, Yeah,
I remember it being marketed as a horror movie also, kind of, but I'm not sure anybody really knew how to market
you can't, I
this
don't
thing.
know if you could classify it really.
It's hard. It's a tough
kind
one
of
to
like
figure
what
out.
I think we've talked about it before, where Jacob's Ladder, what would it be considered? Some people call it a drama, and I'm like, it would definitely be more of a psychological thriller horror, in my opinion, where this kind of falls in line with that.
But it is also it's very much dramatic. Yeah, it is. But this might be also why Patty Chayefsky disregarded this.
Oh,
Patty does he want that put into a genre?
Who's Patty Chayefsky?
The author of the book.
Oh, okay.
Patty Chayefsky is the author of this thing,
you and your
Altered
books.
States. It says Altered States, a novel, in case you're confused about what this might be. Patty Chayefsky was very controlling about his scripts. This was his first novel. I don't know for sure that he wrote it with the intention of selling it as a movie. It wouldn't surprise me if he did. That was pretty common stuff. Nathan, you've dealt with a lot of novelizations of movies in the past. Maybe you know this better than I do, but from what I understand, in the 70s, it was really common for a studio to kind of quietly commission a book to be written just so they could make a thing out of buying the options to it, making it a movie, then re-releasing the book as now a major motion picture with
it's a movie
12 pages
tie-in.
of pictures stuck in the middle and make a thing out of it. I don't know if this was one of them, though.
I don't think so. I
have not found any information.
I mean, he wrote Network, right?
Yes.
Which is also something you can't really classify genre-wise.
That's hard to pin down also, yeah. Network strikes me as satire more than anything else.
The umbrella is satire, but it's very dramatic, but it's also hyper-realism in the sense that it's not... But it's prophetic, too. So it's, it's very odd. But I don't think that was the case with him writing Altered States. I don't know that he had any ambition of this becoming a film. And I'm not certain if he even wrote like a script for this film. He did, and that was
that's the level of control he wanted over it. He wanted to write the script. He wanted to be on set and make sure that every line of his script was delivered as written. The book itself the movie follows the book very, very closely. I mean, obviously there's some condensation that takes place because you're making a 180-page book into a movie. The book goes on for 8 or 9 pages at a time describing all the test results. Who cares? If there's any differences between the two, they are very, very minor, just in terms of the narrative and overall story. I can only think of 2. In the book version of the story, for example, his partner Arthur, played by Bob Balaban in the movie, in the book it's much more clear that he is an active participant in taking the drugs and getting in the tank, like they switch off.
Yeah. I think I remember that.
Hinted at in the movie, but it's not made quite as
exactly.
obvious.
It's just a hint. Yeah.
And the other thing, which again doesn't really make that much of a difference, but in the novel, the last time he gets in the tank, they let him revert to monkey boy status, then then whip open the door, blast him full of tranquilizers, and spend 4 hours running tests. Like they take hair samples, skin samples, blood samples, EKG, then slide him back in the tank, close the door, and the movie continues from there. But that's really it. Everything else is almost word for word.
So why do you think he pretty much disowned this?
I have no idea. Because it wasn't exact, probably, because they did take stuff out, because they did restructure it. I have no idea.
I mean, also, like, I had a weird upbringing where I would read this type of shit when I was in elementary school. That might say a lot about me. But I've had the movie tie-in of this forever. Yeah.
Oh.
And upon revisiting the film several times over the past X amount of years, I really need to go back and read the book because I'd wondered how much it had strayed. Like, I don't remember, you know what I mean? In fact, I may have read the book before I was able to see the movie, or I knew I was going to see the movie and read the book first.
I might do the audiobook of it now.
Well, that would be fascinating to me as to how someone would read this as an audiobook. Because...
Are there pictures and stuff in it?
Okay, let me put it this way. No, I don't know if that would help. But the reason I brought up that you were marketed this as a horror movie is because I can't figure out if this book is supposed to be horror or if it's satire.
But sometimes isn't that overlapping?
And
like horror is used a lot to be satire for things.
As a vessel.
Well, Katie, as an example of what I'm speaking of, I would like to read a passage from the novel to you, if I may.
You didn't read enough with the intro?
One that he hasn't authored.
Oh, okay.
I was going to read this in the voice of Sean Connery, but I can't get through this without laughing in my regular voice, so we're going to try
this is like when Gilbert Godfrey read 50 Shades of Grey.
This is an example of how the novel is written and how it translates to the film. This comes on page 5.
Can you read it as Mel Tillis? Okay.
No,
damn it.
No.
Okay. Continue.
This is documenting Jessup's first trip into the sensory deprivation tank. This is what I believe is portrayed in the first scene of the movie where the credits are rolling.
With the upright tank?
Yes. Let's see. One thing seemed immediately, shatteringly clear. Aside from the beach hallucination, his imagery was of a physiological nature. Apparently, one brings into the hallucination the constructs of one's ordinary life. He was a physiologist, therefore his hallucinations would be within physiological forms. He was looking at his own brain now, moving into the grayish masses of thundering neurons, concerned for the moment with a curious contradiction. Since his hallucinations and his awareness of the hallucinations were both products of his own brain, how could one detachedly observe the other, especially as his self-awareness was now taking the shape of a swollen, obviously aroused vagina, into which his whole body was plunging with trembling anticipation. The vagina changed into a very realistic, extraordinarily eidetic image of a faceless yet somehow beautiful young woman back on the eternally white beach, writhing with sexual exuberance. He was there on the beach, writhing with her, in totally uncharacteristic abandon. Wildly, freely, heedlessly, violently, thrusting at her, in her. He noted that the face of the girl was the face of Jesus Christ, but now distorted into sensual pleasure, despite the crown of thorns on his brow. With a flash of red brilliance, Jessup exploded into orgasm. He was suddenly back in the black, silent tank, floating effortlessly, serene, peaceful, and hooked. So,
I think you should have read it as Phil Hartman, as Charlton Heston, reading Madonna's sex book for the audiobook.
I'm going to be honest.
What the hell
I don't know.
is
Having
that?
seen the movie,
what are we supposed to make of that?
Having seen the movie first, that all makes sense. Because we know that his time in the deprivation tank is definitely pulled from dealing with birth and being unborn and everything. Because remember when they have sex for the first time, he delves into his father dying and all of that. So clearly it's all linked for him. I don't know. I don't.
Okay.
Well, I don't know about that. I think it was just he felt comfortable
Oh,
in talking
no.
about that kind of
I don't know.
stuff
I
with
feel
her.
like it's
Like
all.
there was a bond there.
Well,
but-
isn't there also a huge? No,
Phallus?
stop.
Goat. Eight-eyed goat.
Link to psychological
Missing
stuff.
link?
I'm done.
Lancelot Link?
You know, if Lancelot Link had showed up in this movie, it would have made perfect sense too, I guess.
It would have been
in a
more
way.
awesome. Especially if he showed up with his band.
If any one of the banana splits had showed up in this movie,
Well, really one of them.
if Flegel had suddenly walked across, no.
Flegel.
That first sex scene, by the way, I couldn't help but think of Anthony Perkins in Crimes of Passion.
Oh.
It has almost that same kind of feel to it. If you've seen that one,
Nope.
Yeah.
that wasn't a Ken Russell, was it?
Yeah.
Was it? Oh shit! So he repeats himself. Something else he repeats also, when you see those flashbacks, he loved to do that thing where you have someone in deep saturated color juxtaposed against a background that's way out of scale and moving way too quickly for the scene they're in, like when he's against a background of giant flowers or rolling clouds or snakes or fish or whatever it is. He did that same thing in Lair of the White Worm. I don't think he used it after that, though.
He
It
may
was
have done
definitely a
something like
signature
that in
thing for
Gothic
him.
as well. I mean,
Was
he
it
was
in
the
Gothic?
he
I
was the
didn't know. I
king
don't remember that in
of
Gothic.
like fever dream nightmares, you know, like going
Yeah.
back to like the Devils. I mean, just visuals throughout Tommy. You know, he could
Mhm.
yeah. That's why I was wondering how close it is to the book, because once you have someone like Ken Russell adapting your story, it could go off the rails quite easily. But, you know, from what you're saying, it's pretty damn close still. So
Very
yeah.
much so, yeah.
But yeah, that's I kind of dig that. In fact, while I was revisiting this, the one movie I kept thinking about, aside from his other films, was Exorcist 2: The Heretic. Like I could see Ken Russell directing
Wow.
those
Easily.
crazy
Okay.
sequences. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the flashbacks of Father Merrin, all of that.
Probably would have done a better job at it, really.
Although I love visually, I mean, you can say all you want about that movie, but visually and the score and everything, like it's total eye candy. And yeah, that first flashback, or not flashback, I'm sorry, one of the dream sequences where William Hurt and Blair Brown are essentially doing a yogurt commercial, you know? It felt like I was watching Exorcist 2: The Heretic, kind of.
Yogurt
It felt like they were doing Yoplait or something. I don't know.
Speaking of Blair Brown, this was the first movie for a lot of people. I think it was John Hurt's first movie. It was Drew Barrymore's first movie, if you look closely. I don't think it was hers, though. She was Paper Chase before this, or was it immediately after?
No, it was before.
She did this one in Space and Continental Divide, really close together.
Which, that one, is that 81? Or is that...
Oh, I don't know.
80 or 81. I think that might be it. But at any rate, she was... I love her in this movie, by the way. I think she has such a strong performance in it. And like you could easily just write her off as, oh, it's the soon-to-be ex-wife character who... But, you know, through and through, she still cares about him no matter what. And she thrusts herself into this world to get him back in a certain way, you know?
She does a lot with very little. I mean, in the book, that character is pretty much only described as an anthropologist with great legs. And that's about it.
Well, that's because women serve no purpose in a lot of
would have gone
stories.
into any more detail. Yeah.
Maybe that's why you got pissed.
Well, that's what I liked her in this, is that she could easily be written off as, oh, she's just like going to be the scared, you know, typical female who's like, what's going on here? You know, like that bullshit. Or you could really serve a purpose in this and get involved, and she does. But I mean, also that's her background, kind of. Not exactly that, but she's not one to sit on the sidelines, right?
Oh, the supporting cast is fantastic in this movie. I mean, Bob Balaban is in here. Charles Hayde, who is fantastic.
Yes. John
I
Larroquette.
love every moment of him in this movie. John Larroquette in his first movie also. The lab tech.
Well,
I think he gets one line.
Unless you count Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But yeah, no, you also have George Gaines. Commandant Lassard is in there very briefly. You blink and you miss him. Kind of like you blink and you miss Drew Barrymore.
Yeah.
It's a crazy movie to think. I mean, you know, we just lost William Hurt not too long ago. And I was discussing with my buddy about just what kind of, no other actor had that trajectory that he had. Like, if you look at every movie he did in the 80s, everything was like an instant classic.
Gorky Park.
Whether it's Kiss of the Spider Woman, Children of a Lesser God, The Accidental Tourist, Broadcast News, Eyewitness, Big Chill, this movie. Like, this is his first movie, lead role in a Ken Russell film. Come on, you know?
You're asking a lot of somebody for that.
I mean, goddamn. Maybe it was that. Maybe it was like, hey, we're going to put this actor through a whole shitload of stuff with Dick Smith's effects. Maybe we can't get an A-lister for this. Maybe we have to seek somebody out like that. But
he's going to be showing a lot of man butt. We need to get a new guy.
There's that too. Yeah.
We need to get some new butt in here. Fresh butt, if you will.
But I mean, you know, if I watched this today and I didn't know about his other films, I wouldn't guess this was his first film at all.
There is a lot of good man butt in the movie. I didn't think I was going to get it at first, but then it happened. And penis, actually.
You get some ape butt.
I did say during that scene that I kind of hated that I was going to have to talk about the hairy ape ass.
You don't have to.
You just did.
It's all right.
You know.
But now that you bring it up, how about that hairy ape butt?
I mean, you can clearly... Is it him that plays that? Because I feel like, you could tell because body size.
No, it's more like...
Miguel Gaudreau plays the part of the Primal Man. He was a professional dancer.
That makes sense. And
honestly, the Monkey Boy parts of this movie were not that interesting to me as the rest of it.
Well, it's because you're putting you're putting it into reality, and you're like kind of Katie was saying, I didn't think it was going to go this way. And once you put it into primal, you know, apish kind of stuff, then you're like, oh, it's this. Okay. But before that, you don't know where it's going to go.
And sometimes when you have the unknown in movies where it can go either way, not giving you the full thing makes it more kind of like what we were talking about with The Haunting earlier, where if you show too much, it kind of sometimes takes the wind out of the sails than if it is all alluded to.
Yeah.
Well, also up to that point, we don't know if this is all in his head or if this is really happening, kind of a thing too. Really isn't until they reveal that something got loose in the lab and knocked out a guard, and everybody says, "Oh my god!"
Yeah, Charles Hayde was like, "Did you let this ape in the fucking facility or whatever?"
Yeah. By the way, that facility they shot in was a working, not abandoned at all VA hospital. If that's terrifying for you, it looks like an abandoned building, but no, it's fully functional. Absolutely in operation. But I was just saying, the Monkey Boy thing was about the least interesting part. It was in the book, too. The book goes on for a normal number of pages describing his journeys. And I set the scene for you here. I got to that part in the book when I was at the Dallas County Courthouse awaiting to see if I was going to get picked for jury duty. I'm wearing my Scream Blackula Scream shirt and reading Altered States and giggling my ass off because I was at the point where Monkey Boy goes to the zoo, and the whole part of that book reads something like, "The water he understood, but these crazy lights in the sky were dazzling and bewildering to him." And I immediately start thinking of Phil Hartman's Caveman Lawyer.
Yeah.
And just could not stop laughing through this whole part of the book. And the movie hits me the same way.
That scene made me think of American Werewolf in London when he wakes up in the zoo the next day.
Yeah, which came after this, yeah. There are those parallels. And he's naked also, you know.
Yeah.
But I think the ape shit is still creepy to me. Yeah, I said ape shit. No, it is. It's creepy, but at the same time, it can be a little problematic. But I think just the approach to it is scared the shit out of me when I first saw it. Especially when that overnight guard, and he hits him, clubs him over the head, like that whole thing, and running down the corridor, kind of crazy, you know, kind of like Dean Stockwell in Werewolf of Washington, almost in slow motion.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know.
Werewolf of Washington. No, if this was shot by anybody with lesser skills, it would have been a comedy.
Oh, I could see this
all
being
the way, unintentionally.
I wouldn't want to see this with a current audience at all, because I could just hear the giggles throughout every time.
Oh, big time.
Yeah. Even in, like, you know, at the Native American reservation thing with the whole crazy gumbo, you know, like I could just hear the audience laughing, whereas back in 1980 they were not laughing.
By the way, the Hinchi Indian tribe is completely made up as far as I know. There is a place in India called Hinchi, but that's as close as it gets. The tribe is fictional.
Yeah.
I honestly like that better, because then you don't have to potentially worry about like falsely portraying something.
Right, and it's not important that you follow a line of like credibility in that sense. That this is just, it's a launching point for the next phase, right? So you don't want to get too well versed in that.
Something that I took away from that whole sequence, probably it hit me after the third time I watched it. We'll see what you two think about this. But this movie came at a turning point in, at least in American culture, where we're moving from 70s to 80s, from hippie movement into cultural backlash. We've talked about this in other episodes like Fabulous Stains and things like that. We're moving from this sense of community into a sense of self. It's all about me 80s. So what struck me about this in the movie was, and the part that Jessup does not understand, is when he goes to this tribe to find this drug that they've been doing, they're doing it as a community, as a part of this whole ritual, and they're doing it together. He takes it and completely isolates himself from any community whatsoever and makes it all about himself. And maybe that's the big problem he has, is he lost that connection and goes completely off on his own into nowhere.
But that also goes into the whole thing you were talking about in the intro about how dealing with these mental health issues and things like that, isolation is key. And knowing nothing about this as I was watching it, because he was talking about his experiments and the study of schizophrenia and all that, I was expecting there to be a schizophrenia diagnosis within his character in the film. Like, that's where I was expecting it to go, because of how it was playing out with the isolation and everything.
It would have made sense, yeah.
And I mean, technically, you could still even go one way with that, where if you want to believe that maybe the ape stuff wasn't happening, you could even put on that he was schizophrenic and that was his other personality or whatever.
We get that moment where he's in the shower and looks down and sees monkey feet and kind of laughs to himself. But really, it is still all in his head up to a point. And I think we maybe lost something by not keeping it there. But then again, that's not the point of the book. It's not the point of the movie, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean,
there is a point to the
we
movie.
don't have his POV on that shot.
That's
so
true.
You really are looking at it from the audience perspective. If it's visually at play, then it's happening. That should be the rule, right?
Yes and no. Because I know of other films where they show stuff, but it still is questioned as to whether or not it is what we saw, or it could be still a display of mental health issues. And what comes to mind with that is Hereditary, which I know you haven't seen, but the whole movie is about dissociative identity disorder. And when you watch the film, you can go, okay, it's just her experiencing that through the whole film, and then it culminating at the end in this really holy shit moment, or it is more sinister and more supernatural.
Well, yeah, but also, like, if you see like a paranormal based film, and it's is this happening or not happening? Is there really paranormal activity? If you see the ghost on camera, then it's happening. That's the way I look at it, right? Then you've lost the whole suspension of whether or not this is actually occurring. Like it could all be in that person's mind or whatever. But once you,
No, I can get that.
but if you do it from their POV, that's different.
Mm-hmm.
So and then that whole scene in the shower, I thought that's an audience laugh out moment. Like I could see that. Them just because, you know, meanwhile they'll sit through fucking Morbius and not chuckle at all, right? Whatever. Anyway, yeah, but I don't know. I just feel like that's maybe the problematic aspect to this is once, like I was saying with the ape thing, once you put it in front of us, it is happening, right? I mean,
I can see it both ways.
like we're seeing him murdering, or he didn't murder that guard, but he clubs him over the back of the head.
Yeah.
We see him in the park.
And the cops do say there is an ape or animal in the building. It's
Right.
not like they were like, oh, we just saw something.
Right.
Because depending on the wording used there, then we could potentially say, okay, maybe we are shown that this is how he's perceiving himself at the moment, even though it's not necessarily who he is.
Yeah. Now, had it been Wolf and Vision, it could go either way.
Oh, too bad we didn't get Ape Vision.
Sure.
Yeah, that's why I felt.
Oh, Ape
seriously,
Vision.
I felt like that's a
Damn.
lost opportunity. There should have been something like that, especially in the beginning of him turning into it. Full stop.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to see it right away, right?
But do apes see differently than humans? I mean, dogs, like wolves, would have different vision than a human being would. So it makes sense for in Wolfen to have that wolf vision.
Right. Well, I mean,
whereas
it doesn't have to necessarily be distorted or anything, but just
I don't
Right.
know
just
if we were
seeing
going for
him
scientific
going through all
realism
this
here.
with that
I mean,
perspective.
I'm just trying to make a point.
I mean, we didn't get that in Monster on the Campus either, so.
One of many things we didn't get in
Yeah.
Monster on the Campus.
Well, essentially, it becomes a werewolf movie without the werewolf. It becomes the transformation.
It's a transformation
Yeah,
movie.
It does.
And I think it has potential to go elsewhere or even further,
That is
maybe.
a point they missed.
I mean,
That's a point they missed, though, isn't it?
I think with what they show with happening to her at the end and all, shows that there is the potential for more with this.
Yeah.
Because had it not impacted or affected her, even though we don't
But
know the extent
why?
of that,
Why did it impact her at all? Other than
their connection.
just to tack an ending onto this story.
Well,
No,
and,
because I
and then
think we're
him
shown that they
embracing
have a
her
connection.
at the very end
Mhm.
makes everything back to normal, which when he
Sure.
was changing, he touches her and she becomes Lava Woman, right? Which is, by the way, that's true because Dick Smith used a reflective in the cracks of the suit and they projected lava on it. But
Anyway,
yeah, it just becomes like, do you buy that ending? Is it all said and
do
done?
you buy
No.
anything about this movie?
no.
I kind of
You
do,
don't
but I
have to be
feel
so
like
angry
I feel like
about
it's just a wrap up. Like this wouldn't be a continuous thing with him. Like I think he's
No,
damaged
I mean-
for life.
What did he learn from this whole experience?
Well, but that's the other thing. He's addicted to this.
We don't know. Nothing.
He's going to go back to it.
He learned nothing.
He decided not to get a divorce. I don't know.
I don't know. The book ends the same way. It just ends with the embrace, and that's it. There's no conclusion. There's no epilogue. There's no nothing.
And they both lived happily ever after.
Yeah, basically that's how it ends. Yeah, they embraced in the white sunlight of the living room. That's it.
Well, isn't it? I mean, I feel like some of his point is because she always makes a point to talk about how he has never said that he loves her,
Mm-hmm.
which, however, this was panning out, the culmination was him finally being able to say that he could love her for whatever reason that may be. So their story comes to an ending when he can finally say that part.
Yeah, it's full
So
circle
whether
for
or
them.
not,
Yeah.
So it could be that what he went through had to help him through clearly the things that he was struggling with, whether it be what his father was going through when he was dying or everything else. So
There's a lot of avenues in this. There's also one thing that I enjoyed. I wish they would have pressed further. I mean, I don't know that it would have went anywhere, but I like how transfixed Bob Balaban is on that monitor in that sequence when Charles Hayde opens the, and then the white
The
like
monitor
right,
goes white.
and then you
yeah.
could see Balaban. He's in that room because the window's right there, and you could see Hay dealing with the situation in that next room, and he's transfixed. He's not looking at the action in the next room at all. He's just looking at that monitor, and they cut to him, and he's just. I was like, does he get affected by this beyond that?
I don't know. The first thing I thought of was the Andromeda strain when one of the scientists looks up at the monitor and because of her epilepsy is transfixed by it and collapses. And I don't know if there was anything to that or not. It's not mentioned that way in the book. I don't know. There's nothing there.
I feel like it felt like there was going to be more to that, and there wasn't.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a little manic afterwards, obviously, but that's about it.
Oh yeah. That last sequence in that lab with the whole smoke vortex.
I love that.
Fucking amazing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I still want to know how they did that because it looks.
It's not dry ice.
I know it looked like water.
Yeah. I don't know though.
I don't know
because she walks through it like it's dry ice or something, but it looks like water.
Yeah. You can kind of see a little bit of sloshing, like it's definitely a liquid of some kind. I don't know. It just looked amazing.
Yeah.
There were a lot of amazing visuals in this movie. The whole sequence when they walk into the cave for the first time to do the ceremony was all just brilliantly shot.
Oh, that was creeped me. I remember when I first saw that.
Everybody
it was just
turns into dust.
Yes,
it's great.
Yes. No, I love this movie for better or worse. I mean, there's some avenues I would like to explore further. Yeah, it still creeps me out. I enjoy it. The whole, especially one of the things that even before, like when they first go and they get him out of the tank, and he's got the bloody nose and he's got all that white shit on his forehead.
White goo, yeah.
Like, what is going on? You know, like what we don't see is scarier, obviously.
I do love that with films.
Yeah.
Where the not seen is, it almost makes it scarier than if they had shown you the thing.
And then there's, at first when I was watching it again, I was thinking like, is that his blood? Or is it, something he bit into and we don't know about? You know what I mean?
took it as the goat.
Yeah.
They don't test it though. They test
Well,
everything
he burnt
else.
the cloth.
They don't test the blood.
Yeah.
I took it as in he burnt the cloth because he didn't want to acknowledge as to whether or not it could have been from something else.
Because he hates this whole experimentation at this point. Yeah.
But
also, are we supposed to think that him and Eddie's separated wife are supposed to be having a thing go on?
I don't know.
I didn't get that.
I did, because their kiss at the door was a little longer than the
average. It was almost like, hey, you just
greeting.
came to visit just to, even though he was going to be there with a purpose.
And they were writing each other the whole time she was gone. I was just curious as to whether or not we were supposed to accept that. Because she even talks about how she's tried to move on from him with other men over the last year and hasn't been able to.
If there was something there, that was an addition made by the movie that is not in the novel itself. There's nothing hinted at in the book. If it's hinted at in the movie, that's something they added on. But it's possible.
You could read it either way, really. Like it could just be, like a central grounding force for her, and she's just happy to see him, and vice versa, because they both know they're into some crazy shit right about now, and any semblance of realism is welcomed. Did either of you notice when at the airport when Blair Brown arrives, they're paging a Mr. Daniel Craig?
No, I didn't notice that.
Something I never really picked on before, but I was like, wait, what? What is it?
It's gotta be, it's coincidence.
Yeah, it is. It totally is, but I rewound it, put on the subtitles, and sure enough, Daniel Craig.
Wow. Altered States was made for a budget of about $15 million. It made about 19 back, so it did okay given the competition. But no sequel, no I think there was a series made out of it at one point. Maybe?
Not that I know of. I don't know.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. There is a series called Altered Carbon, but it has nothing to do with it.
Different.
No.
Yeah.
No, I think there was another show called, maybe it was remade or something like that. It's one of those things that disappeared as quick as anybody heard about it.
I could see this being remade now, which I think would be a horrible idea, but I'm surprised it hasn't been attempted. At some point it'll be CG-rific, and I don't know.
Just the mechanics of how it works have kind of come and gone. I mean, there are still sensory isolation tanks out there.
Oh yeah,
and
big
there are
time.
still people who believe in them, but it's not nearly as big a deal as it was through the 70s
And
and on into the
nowadays, they are
80s,
not typically used with drugs.
as far as we know.
I mean, that can be said about anything.
Not officially.
Yeah, it's not like you have to be on some sort of psychotropic drug to do this.
I mean, through the 60s and 70s, this was a huge deal, along with a lot of other stuff like pyramid power and, adorning your entire house with crystals and
primal
whatever else
scream
you could think of.
therapy. Yeah.
Yeah, primal scream therapy too, yeah. Which we saw some hints of in The Howling.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you could do this, and it would be a very, very different movie
I
today
think so,
if someone
yeah.
tried it. Very different.
Well, it's very much a product of its time, as you were saying, and
Sure.
I mean, something like Network is timeless, and maybe this is in its own way as well. But yeah, I don't know that they could do it. I wouldn't want to see them attempt it.
Maybe it'll go about as well as the Jacob's Ladder remake went.
Oh,
There was
wow.
that?
Yeah, I totally forgot about that.
Mhm, couple years
Yes, I
ago.
totally forgot about it
I
until you
didn't even
mentioned
know
it.
I haven't
that.
seen it because I was told very much so to not waste my time with it.
Wow, I honestly had not even heard about it.
I love the original.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
probably
yeah, I
in
mean-
top 10 favorite films for me.
I don't know how you improve on
You
it.
can't.
by
You're not
updating
Adrian
that
Lyne.
particular
Don't
film.
bother.
You just,
No.
no. Then again, if it's out there, someone's planning a remake or a Netflix limited series.
Right, it's
of it or
all about
something.
That's
buying
not
Who knows, maybe.
inherently a bad thing.
For the most part, it is. Because honestly, it's all about capital gain. Like at the end of the day, for a lot of these producers, I mean, they're just
Yeah.
looking to not take a risk. They're taking a prior property that people are associated with, and it may not be for you or me because we have our versions, but there's also I don't know, maybe they'll go see it, because you have that vested interest.
How else are people going to rediscover Altered States? How else are people going to get reintroduced to this particular film? I mean, it's not like it's out there as a cult movie or anything. I don't think it's had a really decent Blu-ray release that I'm aware of. I don't think it's going into Criterion anytime soon.
I think it should go in Criterion, honestly. And as I was watching the Blu-ray,
it's unique.
Well, it's Ken Russell, though. That's money in the bank right there. Like, why not? And I would love to see behind the scenes on this.
I think it would definitely be interesting.
Let me hear the commentary. How did you get William Hurt involved? How did you adapt the novel? How did you, if there's any behind the scenes footage of Dick Smith and his workshop coming up with all these bladder effects and these awesome creations. Would love to see that.
They may not have any.
They may not. I have a Dick Smith documentary where they do a brief interview with Blair Brown, and she talked about, when she went to meet him, she went to his house, I guess, to meet him, and she had to be suited, so she had to have measurements and all that taken.
Mm-hmm.
And when she first walked in, there was a completely nude, life-size rendition of William Hurt, who she hadn't met at that point. And so right off the bat, that was her introduction to William Hurt, seeing his nude physique crafted as like a statue
Good
almost.
physique.
Yeah.
In someone's living
Right.
room. Yeah. Okay.
And then she said she went down like into the next room, and there's the bust of Linda Blair from The Exorcist. And she's like, what have I got myself into?
Fair question.
I would like to have at least had a retrospective documentary or a commentary or something. The Blu-ray just has the trailer, which is awesome, but give me all that publicity material.
Who is still around to do the commentaries? Who's on that list?
There's a ton of people still involved, I think. I mean,
Drew Barrymore.
It wasn't, well, she was like
I mean,
3,
you
I think,
asked.
when this movie was made.
She was 15.
well, that's another thing. Like, how much is in the film versus what was shot? Like, are we missing a bunch of footage? Because I feel like there may have been more scenes of the family, whereas I think she's only in 2 shots in the movie, and they have 2 daughters, which you don't even realize until the next scene, and you barely even see that actor,
It was Megan Jeffers, I believe, played part of Grace Jessup. She has no other film credits that I can find.
Oh, wow. It feels like, they would have liked to, because they jump right into the whole, can you believe it? They're getting a divorce very early on in the movie.
I even asked Michaela because we watched it together, and I was like, "Did I look away?" And they said, "Oh, this is 5 years later or
No.
something," because
It's
it
like a
just
year
comes out
later,
of nowhere.
right?
Mm-hmm. It
This
has
is
to be
how it
more.
plays out in the novel also. I mean, in the written novel, it's announced, oh, they're getting a divorce, and then it immediately moves on to something else. There's nothing there. There's no material to draw from. It's just, they skip right over it.
Well, but didn't you also say that her character, Blair Brown's character, is not well documented in the book? Like,
Yeah, that's true.
so if you're
Yes,
going to give
very
her
much.
life in the film, that's why I'm thinking there's got to be some more stuff. And this is the type of movie I could see is 2.5 hours long, right? With all the shit that's going on. It feels truncated in a way.
I still need to see The Devils.
Talk about a director with a diverse body of work. I mean, I guess you could easily say that he made, I mean, for him to do Women in Love and Tommy in Altered States and something like Lair of the White Worm or whatever.
And Horror with Teresa Russell.
Yes. I mean, he was a vocative filmmaker.
If you can't say it, don't go see it.
Right. Always interesting. Like he seldom would or The Boyfriend with Twiggy. I mean, it's just, like he would never disappoint.
Altered States would not have been the same without him. I can't imagine, especially after reading the book and all the way it describes the visuals of the tank sequences. I was like, I can see why they picked Ken Russell for this.
Yeah. Well, I could see a Paul Schrader doing something like that too. Back then, talking about the Exorcist prequel, but like Cat People. Yeah.
Hold on. Do I know who Paul Schrader is?
Yeah, writer of Taxi Driver, director of American Gigolo, The Canyons.
I got nothing. I have nothing else to say about Altered States. Does it?
I think we've said it all.
And then some.
I enjoyed it. And it really, really, really made me want to watch Jacob's Ladder.
What about his former?
Go back and watch what?
Tommy, which approaches this kind of subject matter, but from an extremely different direction. As in censor deprivation. But that's a different thing. Completely different story.
Katie, have you not seen Tommy? Movie. You absolutely have to see that.
I'm familiar with it. I know it. I own it.
No, if you love musicals, rock opera. Yeah. Tina Turner, holy shit. Yeah. As the Acid Queen. Elton John.
There's also a fantastic
so many great things about
documentary on Amazon Prime about the making of that album that's worth watching if you're interested. None of that matters for Altered States. It's a fascinating movie in its own way. It doesn't have a huge following. The book, if you want to read it, this one will soon be at the Half Price Books at Northwest Highway in Dallas. I'll take the Post-it notes out first if you want to check it out. Check out the book at your local library. Then give it back to them and watch the movie. It's streaming somewhere, I think. I think it might be on Tubi, maybe. I don't know. It kind of...
Not Tubi.
It kind of...
It's on Tubi. That's where I watched it. No, it's not. That's a lie. I rented it on YouTube.
Rented on it? Oh, really? That's interesting.
$2.99.
Okay. So anyway, check it out. Altered States. Pop a bag of popcorn. Kick back and watch a Monkey Boy. I don't know what else to say. Nathan, you got anything else? Any final thoughts on Altered States?
No.
Katie?
I will most likely watch Jacob's Ladder tonight.
Or Hot Rod.
And with that, we'll say goodbye. Bring this episode to a close, and we'll see you next time.
I'm an ape man, I'm an ape man, oh I'm an ape man. I'm a King Kong man, I'm a voodoo man, oh I'm an ape man.
Here we are again, dear listeners. Another show has come to a close. But don't worry, another thrilling episode will be here before you even know or understand what happened to this one. The Smooth Thrills Radio Hour is a production of Ghostcraft, and as far as you know, is recorded live in Dallas, Texas. Now go find a lovely bunch of funny mushrooms, and enjoy the rest of your day.
And I'll be taking off my clothes and living in the jungle. It's the only time that I feel at ease is swinging up and down in the coconut tree. Oh, what a life of luxury to be like an ape man.
This has been a Ghostcraft presentation.